part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Scott Sabol.
And I'm John Sabol. Thanks for tuning in.
So, John, this is a big one. And, we really took some time. You took some time in trying to line this one up because this was kind of your baby. You really wanted to get our guest here today. And it is none other than Larry Doby Jr., the son of Larry Doby, who broke the color barrier in the American League back in the 1940s. And he is going to give us a whole lot of perspective and a whole lot of stories and just perspective that we can't give. And a lot of us can't even relate to.
We can't. And we can't imagine what he or what Jackie Robinson went through during those days. You hear stories about it. I think the big thing that I want to get out of Junior is, why does he think that his dad doesn't get the proper recognition that Jackie Robinson did? Because he broke the AL color barrier 3 months after Jackie did. And Indians/Guardians have done a good job honoring his father. But I think Major League Baseball should do more, in my opinion. I know you agree.
Agreed.
I want to know what his perspective is on that. Our chat with Larry Doby Jr. coming up right after this.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
What's up, everyone? Chase Smith here, host of the Chase Smith podcast, and my podcast reflects who I am. My hobbies, my interests, my passions, my curiosities, my careers, my questions, and my family. I'll spend time talking about all types of sports, movies, TV shows, trending news stories, and other cultural events, and even faith. This is who I am, and I hope I can get to know you as well. Join me on the Chase Smith podcast, and let's have some thought-provoking conversations, only on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, this is Mike Voorhees.
And I'm Brian Shaw. No, not the pitcher. We're the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast, formerly a Swing and a Tribe.
Don't have time to watch 162 games of baseball? We do. We have you covered with recaps of the games, stats, and analysis throughout the MLB season.
Subscribe now to Guardians of the Land and Press Play Pods for all your Cleveland sports analysis.
Welcome back to Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, all part of the Press Play Podcast Network. We have a very, very special guest with us today. He is the son of former Major League Baseball player, a former Cleveland Indian, a Hall of Famer in the 1998 National Baseball Hall of Fame class. His father was Larry Doby Sr, played for the Indians in 1947, 1955. A great baseball career, is well known here in the Cleveland area for what he did on the field, but also becoming the first African-American man to break the American League color barrier. We're to get into all that. His son, Larry Doby Jr., is our guest here on the podcast. Mr. Doby, how you doing today?
I am doing fine, gentlemen. No complaints.
We appreciate you taking the time. I know you and I got a chance to meet each other on opening day here in Cleveland when the Guardians opened up with the Giants, and that was a pleasure to sit there and talk with you about your father on Jackie Robinson Day, with opening day happening this year, because since the season started a little late this year. So real quick, before we get into your father, for fans that don't know what you do, you live in New Jersey, you live in the house that you grew up in, but
Yes,
you work in the entertainment industry.
Yes,
Explain to us what exactly you do.
I am a stagehand for the local one union, which is IATSE. It's New York City and some surrounding areas is the jurisdiction. We do basically all venues that have to do with Broadway plays, concert halls, television stations, and other variations of all that.
And I remember 2017, Scott, we had a chance actually to not meet you, but see you in Cleveland at Progressive Field.
Yes.
During the Billy Joel concert. You're work with Billy as a roadie pretty much. And you travel with him for many, many years. How long have you been with him?
About 26 years, somewhere in that vicinity.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when he mentioned you on stage, they put the camera on you. You're wearing an Indians jersey. The whole crowd went nuts.
Yeah, it's always nice to come to Cleveland because of the special place it is to my family and myself. And it was even, nicer because I wasn't there for something for my dad, but my boss deemed it fit to mention me, and it was a special moment.
Mm-hmm. So let's go into your father real quick. You and I discussed on opening day what he has meant to the organization. There's just so many questions and so many factors and variables that he had to go through, and we're going to get into all that. But for casual young baseball fans that don't know the history, your father broke into Major League Baseball in about 3 months after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, but your father broke the American League color barrier. And in my opinion, and I know my brother Scott will agree with me on this one, he gets a little overlooked, a little overshadowed a little bit because of what Jackie did, which what Jackie did was tremendous, but unfairly so. In my opinion, I feel like your father needed to get more credit for what he did. When he was alive, did he voice that same sentiment, or did not bother him that he didn't get the pub that Jackie did?
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. He never voiced it. I can't say if it ever bothered him, but he never said that it did. And the reason was because you just said what Jackie did was tremendous, and I'm not taking away from that. Well, they did the same thing. They just did it in different places and 3 months apart. Nobody ever said, we're going to be nice to the second black guy. It was the same exact things that both of those gentlemen faced. And they both knew that if they weren't successful, that the people coming behind him would have had to wait a long, long time. They called it the Great Experiment back then, which to us of today is crazy to think that it was an experiment whether blacks and whites could play together. It's crazy to think like that, but that's what they called it. And they were both, especially my father, were very grateful for the opportunity. And he knew that if he didn't succeed, it would be a long time. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of my father for is that because of his efforts, his accomplishments, and his abilities, he opened the door for many to come behind him. Little kids before my father couldn't say to themselves, I want to dream of being a big league ball player one day, because it hadn't happened. That wasn't a possibility. After Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby, little boys of color could go to bed at night and say, I want to be a big league baseball player. To me, that's what I'm most proud of him for.
What was your dad's relationship like with Jackie Robinson?
Well, as you could probably guess, they were probably the only two people that could talk about certain things, because they were only two people going through what they were going through. The relationship was one of tremendous respect. My father was in the Navy in the South Pacific in 1945 when it came across the radio that Mr. Rickey had signed Mr. Robinson to play in Montreal in 1946. Immediately, they were all very happy. And I'm sure in the back of their mind, they thought maybe some of us are going to get a chance. But my father always referred to Jackie Robinson as Mr. Robinson. So that shows the respect that he had for him. As I said, they shared a lot of experiences, talked on the phone a lot about, what they were going through, segregated hotels, restaurants, what have you, who the good guys were, the bad guys were, how to deal with it. And I think, fortunately, they also played in a lot of barnstorming games, which was after the Major League season was over. Those teams of all-stars would get together and they would go to cities that didn't have Major League Baseball. Back in the day, there was nobody west of St. Louis and south of Washington. So the vast majority of the country had never seen professional ball players in person. And it was a very lucrative thing. I think at some point it was the Jackie Robinson All-Stars against Bob Feller All-Stars, Jackie Robinson against Satchel Paige against Jackie Robinson. And this went on probably for 4 or 5 all seasons. And then the commissioner put a kibosh on it they were making a lot of money, and I'm not going to say MLB wanted a cut of it, but they put a kibosh on it. Let's just say that. And it ended. And, my father was disappointed. I remember him saying that, but it was a lot of fun. Camaraderie obviously grew out of that. They were teammates, instead of, they didn't have interleague then either. So, I think it was very enjoyable for him, Monty Irvin, Luke Easter, Joe Black, Roy Campanella, all the names that, people know in the big leagues, and the stars from the Negro leagues that people didn't know.
Do you think, and I asked this question to you as part of our interview for Fox 8 on opening day, but for our listeners who didn't get a chance to hear it and see it, do you think Major League Baseball should have a Larry Doby Day similar to they have a Jackie Robinson Day?
It's such a difficult question, because in my heart, I feel like they should. But my job now as my father's son is to continue his legacy, and also continue his legacy in the manner that he would have continued it. And my father never would have ever campaigned or politicked for anything like that. So I almost feel I'm betraying him by saying, yes, I think they do. That's my feeling inside, but it's for the powers that be. I think it would be wonderful. I think it would be fair and just, but that's not for me to say. When Commissioner Seelig was the commissioner, there was some talk of that. And, it didn't come to fruition for whatever the reasons may be. And that's that. So as a Doby, we just keep our head up and we keep forging ahead. You have to deal with the hand that's dealt you, John. That's what you have to do.
Why do you think your dad doesn't get maybe necessarily the respect that Jackie does in today's society? We always hear about Jackie Robinson, which is great, but unless you're a baseball fan, maybe the casual baseball fan might even not know who your dad is, which is kind of a shame. Do you think there's a reason for that? Or is it just one of those deals where it just happened?
I think it's the nature of America. Number two is tremendously overlooked, no matter how similar the contributions to number one are. That's just the way we are. We're a nation of winners. Mm-hmm. Now, the cool thing about America up until recently is that we celebrated number ones, and we also gave second chances to people who had fallen, at the same level. That doesn't seem to be the case today, this cancel culture. Somebody says a bad word about somebody and they're done. And I would much rather have people being afforded a second chance than my father being given his just due as number two. I think it's much more important for the country. But that's what I think it is. It's number two. The funny thing is that the number two man on the moon, do you guys know who that was?
Buzz Aldrin.
Okay, very good. He lives in Montclair, New Jersey, where my father lived, where I live now. So we're the little town of twos, and it's fine. Just kind of the way it goes.
We as in my brother and I, Larry, we pride ourselves on knowing history. We were taught a lot of history from our parents, and just I picked up a lot of baseball history from my brother, and just kind of learning a lot about different things. And so when you asked me that question, American history, it's like, oh, I know that, just because you got to pride yourself on knowing little things.
And we have NASA right here, and we used to go on field trips to NASA all the time. So a lot of this stuff was just ingrained in our head over time.
Yeah.
Tell us a little, or two or three, or maybe just one, a little unknown story about your father that you want fans to know about. It could,
unknown story.
It could be a story about baseball. It could be a story of him with you growing up and raising you, or just something that we don't know, or maybe something we do know, but we need more light.
I'll tell you two quick stories. One was when I was coming out of high school and being recruited at colleges. I played three sports, but majority of my recruiting, all my recruiting was football and baseball. And I didn't have a choice. I was going to college. I mean, I was a kid. I wanted to go to minor leagues right out of high school. Didn't have a choice. My father says, you're going to school. And the recruiting process started, and, Boston College was interested, University of North Carolina, and Duke was interested. And when I told my father that Duke was interested in me, his face lit up, because he knew what a good school it was and what a good education I would get. And the recruiting process originally began with the football office. So that was our original connection, and it was going well. And it was looking like that's where it was going to go. I knew I was going to graduate from college, so I wanted to go to the best school I could go to, and hopefully I would like to go to warm weather. So I went to visit Duke in February. It was 70 degrees. I was sold. In the process of that recruiting, they knew that I played baseball. They decided that they were going to give me a scholarship for baseball because they knew I was going to play football anyway. So it was like getting two guys for one. Well, the baseball coach at Duke happened to be Enos Slaughter. Do you guys know the stories about him and Jackie and so forth? Okay. So we didn't know this because my contact was all football, and then this happened. Okay, so I wasn't so keen on all those stories. I didn't know. But when I told my father that, he looked at me with a puzzled look, and I didn't say anything. And fast forward, when I was a little kid, he was always telling me, you treat people the way that they treat you, not the way they treat me, not the way you've heard they are, not the way you think they are, give them a chance. And it was kind of ingrained in me. So now I had a chance to actually put that into practice. I ended up going to Duke playing football and baseball. Coach Slaughter was my coach the first 2 years. I had a wonderful experience with him. And it was always a little bit of a chuckle because my father would always see him at old timers games and functions like that. And when he would come back, he would always say, I saw your coach. He says hello. So that's one story. The other one is my father, though he was on a grand spotlight and accomplished a lot of stuff, and some people held him in very high esteem, he was a very simple man. It was all about feeding his family, being a good husband, loving his wife, his kids, so forth and so on. So after 98, as you guys point out, when he gets in the Hall of Fame, the autograph requests and shows go through the roof. So he's making more money signing autographs, almost more money than he's making at his job. It's crazy how much in demand he was. So at one point he goes to a card show. I know it was the Northwest. I don't know if it was Portland, Seattle, but it was somewhere up there. And let's just say for shits and giggles, they were paying him $5,000 for 5 hours. That was the deal. So he goes there and he does the 5 hours. When he's at the end of the 5 hours, there's still people there that want his autograph. And, so the promoter comes to him and says, listen, I would like to, extend this autograph session, but it's okay with you. And I'll pay you another $2,000, let's say, for the hour. And my father says, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it, but, I'm just tired. I want to go home and see my wife. So he tells me this when he gets home. And of course, I'm shaking my head like, do you know how hard it is for me to make $2,000 and I can't make it in an hour? All you have to do is sit there and sign your name. I like, what are you thinking? And, this is like Murphy, who, if I ever meet Murphy, who invented Murphy's Law, I'll probably go to jail because I'm going to punch him in the face, because all the irony that Murphy spews is never fun. It's always sad irony. So he says no. He goes to the airport. The plane is delayed. He ends up sitting in the airport for like 3 hours when he could have been there signing, making it $2,000, and then he flies home. So that's Murphy's Law, and that's kind of who my father was.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, but yeah, that's that's what you got to deal with too when you have parents that are getting older, and you just got to nod your head and let them do what they want to do.
Without a doubt.
Did your dad ever hold back some of the, horrible stories and how people treated him? Did he hold back those stories to you? And was he more open as he got older to you?
He held all of them back. He never talked about them. The names that I heard growing up were always the good guys. I heard Mickey Vernon's name. I heard Bob Lemon's name, Jim Hegan, Joe Gordon, Steve Groman. Those are all the names that I heard. That's what he talked about. So he didn't talk about that. There's a famous thing where he slid into second base and the second baseman spit tobacco juice in his face. I don't know who that was. Jerry Eisenberg, who is a writer back here, says he does know. But my father never told me, never talked about it. So yes, he didn't. And his when I would hear the stories, it would be either when he was on the phone talking to a reporter, or when he was on the phone with Don Newcomb, who was probably his closest friend in baseball, and they would talk, and I would just kind of put myself in the room, keep my mouth shut and listen. Mm-hmm. But no, he never told the stories of the bad guys. It was always the good guys, and that was good enough for me. I made a mistake once, and I'll never forget this. In 82, 2 or 3. They have the Cracker Jack All-Star game in Washington, D.C. at Robert F. Kennedy Stadium. I believe it's the one where Luke Appling hit a home run when he was like 85.
It's on YouTube. I've seen that clip.
Yes, I believe it was that one. And I always wanted to meet Mickey Vernon. I don't know if you know the story about Mickey Vernon and my dad. Do you know that?
We don't.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Mickey Vernon, Billy Goodman, and one other name which I don't know were all stationed in the same island, and it was called Ulithi in the South Pacific with the Navy. And one of my father's job was to put the Navy men through their physical work to get them ready to go. So he was like the exercise, and we call it a personal trainer today, but they didn't call it back then. But that was one of his jobs. And in their downtime, they would play baseball. They would throw batting practice to each other. They would have little games and so forth and so on. And Mickey Vernon, said to my father, I'm going to write a letter to Clark Griffin because you can play in the big leagues. I'm pretty sure. And he writes the letter and Clark Griffin says, listen, thank you for your letter, but we're not interested now. And that was that. But to think of a person like that who would do something like that when it could be costing him jobs, either immediately or down the line, it's fantastic character. So, and also after, I think in the next year in 46, my father goes to the New York Eagles and Mickey Vernon sent him a couple of Louisville Sluggers. And it was the first time he ever got to use big league wood, as we would call it. So my father never forgot that. And they were teammates. They were lifelong friends, teammates with the Indians at some point, and they played against each other too. But it was just kind of amazing to me that he would do that. And I wanted to meet him because I heard, like I said to you guys, I heard the good stories. Mm-hmm. So we're at the Cracker Jack All-Star game. Now you got to remember, I've seen pictures of Mickey Vernon when he was 20 and 30, and they were 60 now. So I didn't know what he looked like. I had never met him before. So I went up to the guy who I thought was Mickey Vernon, and it was Eddie Robinson. You know that story, right? Do you know that story?
I don't know that story.
My father grabbed me and said, come here. And that was it. When my father gets to Comiskey Park to play his first game, he was a second baseman in the Negro Leagues for the New York Eagles. Monty Irvin was the shortstop. He was the second baseman. Pretty good combo there.
Mm-hmm.
So at second base is Joe Gordon. He's not going anywhere. So they want to get my father in the game. They asked him to play first, which he never played before. And as you guys know, you have to have a special glove to play first base. Mm-hmm. They ask the Indians for the first baseman's glove, and the first baseman says no. So they have to go and get the first baseman's glove from the White Sox, and he plays, and the rest is history, as you know. But at the Cracker Jack All-Star game, I am dying to meet Mickey Vernon, who was so good to my dad. It is at least 40 years later. I only have a picture of him when he's in his 20s or 30s, 40s, whatever. It's 40 years later, and I go up to the person who I think is Mickey Vernon, and it's Eddie Robinson.
Oh, man.
And my father grabs me and goes, let's go. And that was it. Didn't say anything else about it, and that was it.
Wow.
Yeah, you almost kind of wonder what players of that time, like an Eddie Robinson, as they got older, you almost wonder if they felt remorse or if they felt guilty.
I would like to think so, because I think that all of us, black, white, green, purple, make mistakes when they're young, and then sit back when you get older and, think, okay, I would have done this differently or whatever. So, yeah, I would think so.
Did you ever chance to meet Mickey Vernon eventually?
I don't think I ever met him. No. And when my father, I think something came out about my dad, and I got his number and I called him, and I told him how much he meant to my father and how much it meant to me that he was good to him. And he started crying on the phone. And I was so happy that I made that phone call. He was older, and you know how those things, like, I'll call him later, I'll do it. And if you wait too long, your opportunities are gone. So I did it, and I'm very glad to this day. I think most of us, if we look back at our lives, we're going to regret the things we didn't do, not the things that we did do. And I'm so glad that I did call him and got to speak with him and let him know how much he meant to my dad.
Yeah, you're so right about that, Larry, when it comes to that, because you got to take advantage of the opportunity and just do it.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of those ball players that were really close with your father that helped him along the way. I'm just curious, as you know, Cleveland Indians fans growing up here and knowing a lot about the history of the organization. Can you talk about the relationship your father had with Bob Feller?
Well, the relationship with Bob Feller was different because Bob Feller was at the top. He was not a normal player. He was the best in the business. Okay. My father was just some rookie trying to make it. So much like Joe DiMaggio, who my father said Joe DiMaggio never spoke to him the first 47, 48, 49, never spoke to him. And in 1950, my father was in center field in the All-Star game. Joe DiMaggio was in right and Ted Williams was in left. And he started talking to him then, and then they had a wonderful relationship the rest of their lives. So the same thing with Feller. You know, he was at the top of his game. Who is this rookie? You know, prove yourself. And, you know, so I think, you know, there was a little hesitancy at first, which maybe had been from a lot of people. And John, not because he was black, but because he was different. You know, like, I don't think that a lot of those people hated him because he was black. I think they didn't know what to expect because he was black. And I think they were hands off, number one. Then number two was like, can he help us win? So when they got over those two things, I think the relationship with most of his teammates was at the very least cordial.
Yeah.
Now, yes, there were some people who didn't like him and did things, but you know what? When they're on that field together, they have a common goal and they're one and they want to win. And they could care less if he had, you know, blue hair. If he could hit or catch the ball, it's okay.
You hear about a lot, right? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say now, as I will, I'm not making excuses for them, but I'm just saying what I think is real. I also want to point out how the ones that accepted him from day one were. And that was Joe Gordon. That was Jim Hegan. That was Bob Lemon. You know, when he goes on the field for the first time in Comiskey Park on July 5th, 1947, he goes up there to warm up. Nobody's playing catch with him. He doesn't know what to do. He said it was the loneliest and weirdest feeling he ever had. And then Joe Gordon comes up and says, hey, kid, are you just going to stand there or are we going to play catch? First day. He didn't have to do that. First day. And ever since then, they were tremendously close.
Wow. Yeah, you hear about like I remember a little before my time, but the Cincinnati Reds of the 70s, you know, a lot of those players, a lot of those guys didn't get along. You hear about Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, you know, they had their time, but you get on the field and that didn't matter. They wanted to win at all costs.
Yep.
We see that a lot now, even in current day sports, guys, when it comes to teams that doesn't matter the sport, it doesn't matter your race. I mean, people just sometimes just don't get along. I mean, you see it from Jordan and Pippen to Shaq and Kobe to LeBron and Kyrie. I mean, it's when it comes to the goal, they reach it and they have a common idea on what they want to do and they do it. And us selfishly as fans want to see that continue, but eventually, unfortunately, the egos and break up and everything like that. You know, a follow up to your Bob Feller comment, Larry, what about like Lou Boudreau and some of those other guys? Were they instrumental?
Well, you know, now you got to remember, you know, he would say, you know, Lou Boudreau had 24 other players to take care of. So he couldn't just, you know, kind of call to my father to take care of my father. He had 24 other guys. You know, the first year was obviously the most difficult because he didn't play that much, you know, and I think he had 30 at bats and, you know, so you're not going to develop any consistency. And so, yeah, he said that, you know, Boudreau had other people to look after. So that's what he said to me. And I understand that. You're a player manager. That's a tough job. So again, I would love to sit here and tell you all this good gossip, but he only talked about the good guys. And those names are, you know, burned into my head.
That's a great quality of your father, though. I mean, that's after all the stuff that he went through, just to still stay positive and not to fall back. It's easy for people to spiral like that, you know, and it just means a lot. And it's, I think it's a lesson anybody can take hearing.
And exactly, John, we talk about how, you know, day to day, something will get on us and it sticks in your head, you know, and it just burns at you. But that pales in comparison to all the stuff your dad went through. And he was still positive throughout it. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, no, I can't either, because you and I growing up in a thing where it's normal. So it's crazy for me to think about the things that they had to go through. But, you know, on a another note, a friend of mine called me today and said, what would your father think about Tim Anderson and Josh Donaldson? And I said, I would love to know, because you guys know the story, right?
Oh, yeah.
What's going on? Yeah. I mean, he self-proclaims himself as the next Jackie Robinson. And then Donaldson calls him Jackie. Maybe he's teasing him or trying to get him off his game. And then LaRussa says it's a racist remark. And I'm like, how is that a racist remark? The guy wants to be known as the next Jackie Robinson. He called him that. So anyway, I just thought to myself, my father would have loved it if they said to him, hey, Larry, when he was playing. But that's not what they were saying when they were like, yeah.
How much does Cleveland Indians Guardians organization mean to you and your family? It's been decades and decades. And what does it mean to you right now? I know that's kind of a big question.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say that the unfortunate thing is when you grow up, when you're my age and you grow up, you can't see them play. So like today, you could basically see any team anywhere. So you can't see them play. So it's hard to root for them when you don't see them. But I did know that I couldn't root for the Yankees or the Mets because those were the New York teams. And the Yankees took money out of my father's pocket almost every year that he played. So I knew that. So conversely, I've grown up to be a huge sports fan and not really have any favorite teams. Obviously, I want the Indians to win. But what Cleveland means to me is it's such a good example of this small little Midwestern town with people of integrity. Because my father, like I said, wouldn't talk about his playing days. I wanted to hear about it. A little kid on his lap. Dad, tell me about this home run you hit. Look it up in the history books, he would say. And there was no discussion. I'm like, that's the last thing you want to do is go read a book. You want to hear the stories. But as I said, he got older. His lips got a little looser. One day we were sitting down watching a game. I don't remember the particular circumstance. And he says to me, I never got booed in Cleveland. And I looked at him like he had been drinking because I was like, I grew up here in Jersey. They booed Mickey Mantle, and I said, what are you saying? He's like, yeah, they didn't boo me in Cleveland. And that just spoke to me. That said, they didn't care if he struck out, if he hit a home run, if he made an error, if he made a great catch. He was theirs, and they wanted him to do well, and they were going to root for him. And that is an example to me of something that you probably don't get in a big city. In a big city, they're worried about making their mortgage payment. Who's this bum not running to first base? They're going to boo. He's overpaid, whatever. They didn't. And the other thing is, a lot of the stories about the injustices that my father went through didn't make the paper. Maybe it was because, it wasn't a front page story like with Jackie Robinson, because New York was the media capital of the world then it is now, or at least of the country. And Cleveland's a small little Midwestern town. But the fact that they treated him so good, there's an old saying, what's integrity? It's what you do when people aren't watching. And people weren't watching Cleveland with a microscope like they were Jackie in New York, and they still treated him good. So it means everything to me that they took care of my dad. It means everything to me that they accepted him. And it's nice that they haven't forgotten him. And whenever they ask me to do something, unless, I'm really, really can't get out of a commitment, I always make sure to be there. And they're still cool when I see them. People see me who are younger than me, so I know they never saw my father play, and they say, hey, nice to meet you, or thank you for your father, stuff like that. So it's tremendously gratifying to have that recognition this much, 75 years later. And again, what he felt about Cleveland, is the way I would wish that every athlete would feel about the city that they play in, and the way that they feel about him. I wish every city felt that way about the athletes that played for him. Unfortunately, that can't happen.
I know you mentioned, Larry, that you played 3 sports growing up. Did you feel any extra pressure to play baseball because of your dad?
No, I didn't feel any pressure to play because I loved it and I wanted to play it. Now when I was playing it, there were certain expectations and certain things said, you're not going to be as good as your dad. Okay. Who is, except Barry Bonds and Brett Boone and, those guys, and then, when it's situation on the line, I better come through and so forth and so on. So it's normal. That's the expectation. You live with it. But I wouldn't have had anybody else as a father. He was so hands off with me growing up, partially because he was away coaching, partially because I don't think he wanted to push me into it and stuff, that when he did want to coach me, I kind of said, I don't really need to listen to you. Where have you been? You told me to listen to my coaches, but luckily I woke up and started listening to him before it was too late.
What was your relationship like, or with what was your father's relationship like with Satchel Paige and other Negro League players? We don't hear that side of the equation.
Right. Well, specifically with Satchel Paige, when he got to the big leagues, my father's statement was he roomed with his suitcase because he was never there when they were together in the roommate. But you got to remember, Satchel Paige was the equivalent of Bob Feller. He was the best pitcher of the Negro Leagues, Bob Feller. And he was huge. He had a plane, a jet in the 40s, at least, maybe the 30s. A black man to have a plane back then. Wow. He would do 3 games in one day and get paid huge amounts of cash. He would do a game in the morning in New York, in the afternoon in Philadelphia, and at night in DC, and they would pay him. He was everything that they said he was. It's a shame that the big leagues didn't see him, in his prime. But I asked my father once about him, and he said, well, he still had a great fastball. It moved, and he had pinpoint control. So that's why he was able to be successful at 42 or 3 years of age as a rookie in the big leagues. As far as the other players and my father, I think they had a real sense of camaraderie, we're in this together, but there's a few things I wish my father would have still been alive for, selfishly, just so I could still have him. But the other things are Obama being president, because there's no way that he thought that would ever happen. And the other thing is Major League Baseball recognizing the statistics in the Negro Leagues as big league statistics, because I don't think he ever would have thought that would happen. And I think if he was alive, I've been asked this question, I think he would have said it was about time, because they felt like they were big leaguers. They felt like they were talented. I know my father always said he was far from the best player when he got signed in the big leagues. He said Josh Gibson was head and shoulders above everybody else, and there were other ones in there that were better than him. But he had the college education, integrated sports, married, naval, military service. He had he checked all the boxes, and he was, the right age. He checked all the boxes and he got his chance. But, he said it wasn't the best player by far. So that to me says that there were big league players on the rest of those teams.
You look at some of those statistics on some of those players, because all those stats are online now from the Negro Leagues, and you look at Josh Gibson and you read the stories, and it's like, wow. I mean, they didn't play a full 162 game season.
No, they didn't.
But if you extrapolate that out, man, some of those numbers are historic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, somebody said a funny story once, like Josh Gibson was the white Babe Ruth, and then the guy goes, no, Babe Ruth was the black Josh Gibson. So he was held in the same esteem as Babe Ruth was.
Yeah, it amazes me, guys, that it took that long for baseball to recognize in those numbers in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it doesn't amaze me, because baseball is such a game of tradition and of numbers. I don't know. I mean, I'm glad that they did it. I think it's fair, but I can understand. That's, baseball is a traditional sport. You know how hard it is for them to change something. It's like, I understand why it took them so long.
Yeah, you look at a number, a record that fell 100 and some odd years ago, and it took, it would take them an act of Congress for them to change whether or not that was an at bat or not.
Yeah.
I got to ask you, did your dad ever tell you what he thought Satchel Paige's age really was?
No, he didn't. He just said that whatever they said it was, he was probably older.
Which is even more remarkable when you think about it, which is crazy.
He was Tom Brady before Tom Brady.
Yeah. Yes, he was. Good point. Yeah. A couple more questions and then we'll let you go. Sure. When you look back at your father, and you look back at what he was able to do 75 years ago, we are coming up on the 75th anniversary of Larry Doby Sr. breaking the American League color barrier coming up on July 5th. Of course, we had Jackie Robinson's in April. Your Father's Day is coming up. Are you aware of any plans from Major League Baseball or, the Guardians, anything that's going to go on to honor him or honor?
I have not been. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Anything that you could shed some light on? I know.
Yeah, I haven't been contacted by MLB, so I have no idea. Luckily, Robert DiBiasio of the Cleveland Guardians I have to keep saying that.
I know.
Yeah, us too.
They are planning to do something around the date because I believe July 5th, the Indians are out of town. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think I will hopefully back out there in July.
So one last baseball question, and then I have a question more about you. Nowadays you hear about memorabilia being such a big thing. We have, my brother and I both have a stadium seat from the old stadium, and we look at those because we remember the memories. Speaking of memorabilia, did your father save any of his Indians gear, a jersey, cleats, stuff like that?
They didn't. There was a bunch of cleats around here. Yes, jerseys. They only got them when they went to the World Series. Oh. That's the only time. I mean, it was baseball was, they were cheap. They were stingy. We'll use these uniforms next year or we'll give them to the minor leagues. So the 54 jersey and the 48 jersey were here as a little kid. I remember putting them on and running around in them. And then one day somebody from the Smithsonian Institute called. And one of them went. And then another day, I don't know, the Indians might have the 54 one. I'm not sure. But the 48 one has the really bad Indian with the nose and all that. And the 54 one has the one with the teeth. And yeah, so they're both gone.
So one's in the Smithsonian and maybe
place. Yes. And the other one is either in Cleveland or in the Hall of Fame, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about your dad's World Series ring?
The 48 one we have. In 54, they didn't get a ring. They got some kind of pin or something like that, which I think my mom had. And so, yeah, that should be around here too.
I got you.
One before Scott, you asked that one question.
Sure.
And Larry, I asked this to you at Progressive Field. A friend of ours is Sean Walsh, who has been on this podcast, and he's the one who was a retired Cleveland construction worker. We had had a guest on here, and he is the one that refurbishes stadium seats. He's the one that gave your father that refurbished municipal stadium seat, and he has a seat of your father's signed by your father in his basement that Scott and I got to see, and it's kind of cool because Scott, when they were tearing this old stadium down, just happened that back in the late 90s, happened to drive by and grab two and gave me one, and Scott has the other. So that's, I guess, one thing we all have in common, but it's pretty cool that the one seat that you still have in your house, I remember you telling me, is from Sean, who we all know and who was a guest on our podcast before.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was sweet when we got that.
So
I remember
go ahead.
when he was there in 74 coaching, was when I spent the summer there. We lived in Parma, Ohio, and I'd drive to the games with him early and stuff. And you literally could have a party in the outfield because there was nobody out, all the way back there and stuff. But it was still, the sense of grandeur of that stadium to me is hard to match, And I believe they had a record for the World Series, but it was broken by the Dodgers in the Coliseum. It was like 80,000 something. And I think my mom was in the stands for that day. So, yeah, that's another place that's close to my heart. And unfortunately, it's gone now, but the memories will live on.
All right. So the last question, more revolving around you. How is your schedule looking? Are you going to be going back on the road with the entertainment business?
Yeah, we've been on the road with Billy Joel. And basically what happened was after the pandemic, we thought that we would just do all the shows that we had postponed because of it. And then William Martin Joel decides to lose like 30 pounds over the pandemic. And now he's roaring ready to go. So there's talk about extending the tour, going to Europe and stuff like that. But as of right now, we're pretty much scheduled to the end of the year. We have one show a month at the Garden, which is considered his residency. And I want to say this is the 7th year. And then this tour, which would be going on probably the same amount of time or about a year less, is normally one show a month away. So in June, we're at Notre Dame's football stadium. In July, we're in Detroit baseball. In August, we're at Pittsburgh baseball. September, we're at Houston baseball, and I'm not sure the rest of it, but yeah, we're up and going. I mean, it was slow when we first got back, but now it seems to be kind of up to speed or passing, because people are trying to make money that they lost, which you can't do, but they're trying it. So the Garden is busy. I work at MSG. The Garden is busy. And at Wicked, there's on Broadway, I work there. That is pretty much packed every night. We're very lucky. And Billy's shows, the last one we did, we were in Charlotte football stadium, and I think we had 43,000 or something.
Wow.
So it's been going pretty good.
Man, is he going to retire anytime soon? Jeez.
I have no idea. John, I would have told you that this is going to be our last year. That's what we all thought, but I don't know. You know, I mean, it's going to end. And when it ends, it's going to be sad. But my sadness is only going to be equaled by my gratefulness, because I've seen the world. I've met wonderful people and got paid. And, you know, it's all because of him. So I don't know how long. I mean, it could end tomorrow if he decides, he wakes up and says, you know what, I'm done. But I don't know when it's going to. I'm sure it's not going to go on forever. And, you know, at least next year, I guess. So we'll see.
How many countries have you been to?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. But I haven't been to as many as you may think, because we tend to go back to the ones that he does really good in.
Right.
So
sure.
we've been to Australia a bunch of times. We've been to New Zealand. We've been to England, France, Germany, Italy, Ireland, England, oh, goodness, Belgium, a bunch. We've been to a bunch, and it's been wonderful. You know, it's like we travel first class. He normally doesn't do 2 shows in a row, so we have some downtime to kind of explore. And, you know, it's been absolutely wonderful. He's a great dude. I'll tell you a quick story about him. He lived in Long Island. He has a house, and he used to have a 4th of July party every 4th. And at this one particular party, I was late getting there. And when I was late, he has a long driveway that goes to his house. What you're supposed to do is drive up to the driveway, to the entrance, leave the car, and let the valet move it. But I said, I'm late. I'm going to leave my car out here. So when I leave, I can just go. My car is going to be closer than everybody else. So I leave my car there. I'm walking up to the gate, and Billy's at the front gate. And he says, what's wrong? My valet's not good enough for you? I'm like, no, Bill, it's just, I was late. I just was in a rush. Da, 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 da. So we're walking up, and he's kind of giving me a little tour of the grounds and stuff. And I said, Billy, do you know what my favorite part of the job is for you? And he goes, F you, you're not getting a raise. And I said, no, Billy. I said that when people ask me if you're a nice guy, I don't have to lie. And it's by far the question that when they find out I work for him, what they all ask me, and I don't have to lie. Because, you know, if he was somebody who was just paying me and wasn't very nice, you better believe I would lie. But I don't have to. And that's the best part of my job, is when they ask me that, I don't have to.
It's really cool to know that about him, because you always wonder, these big superstar athletes and musicians, rock stars, are they really like normal dudes?
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and the funny thing is, you know, like I meet people who have met my dad, and they're like, oh, you know, he was so nice, or he was so this. And I'm thinking to myself, is this the same guy I grew up with? He's a grouchy dude. But, you know, and it's like, it's not really his fault if he met somebody and he was in a bad mood and he wasn't nice to him, because he's just normal. They all have bad days, but those people remember that stuff. You know, it's like they don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yes.
And I feel bad for him, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that says Billy wasn't nice to him. Well, I know this guy. I've known him for 25 years. I know how he treats his crew. I've seen it. So I know he's a good dude, you know, but maybe one day he had a headache, or he had a cold, or he was in a rush, and he didn't stop and look the person in the eye and say, thank you for being my fan. And then that person thinks he's a jerk. But, you know, it's unfortunate. But yeah, that's the best part of my job with Billy, is I don't have to lie.
Wow. We got some extra bonus time there with Billy
I
Joel
love that.
stories. That is great. Well, Larry Doby Jr., we cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit and talk with us about your father, about what you're doing, and that little bonus portion there of Billy Joel. We thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure. I know you're coming back. You could be coming back to Cleveland. I hope to maybe connect with you then again. It was a tremendous honor to hear stories from your father as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of your father breaking the American League color barrier coming up here in July.
Well, thank you guys. It was, like, I don't know, it's kind of like a little bit better when I get an interview from somebody who grew up in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it, guys. You have a fantastic city. I hope that the three of us are like looking at each other at the World Series game before too long. And, maybe another Super Bowl, the first one, that'd be nice too. But it's a great town for people, and it's a huge, great sports town. And, they deserve a winner, and I hope they get one soon. And it was my pleasure, guys, and I wish you guys all the best.
Mr. Doby, thank you very much. You have a great evening, and best of luck on the road.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys. Best of health to you.
That was a tremendous interview. We really cannot thank him enough, Scott. I don't know where to begin. He took a lot of time with us and gave us a perspective that I was hoping to get, and we got, and then some, about his father and what life was like there in the 40s from the stories that his father told him as a kid and as he got older.
And, I was taking some notes as he was talking because I knew we'd have to circle back to some of this. And the one part of what he was saying, and he probably said this multiple times in different ways, was the fact that, he treats his dad's legacy like his dad would want it to be treated. How would his dad react to this? His dad always talked about the guys who were positive, the good guys. He never talked about the bad times. And it wasn't only until late in his life that he started sharing some stories. And so his son, he said, he does the same thing. And it was a lesson that he learned early on that he applies in everyday life. And it's like, wow, that's really powerful.
It's powerful, Scott. And he made a great point. That was the type of guy the era was like. That's that era that produced some good men, good women, but those hard-nosed people, hard work, that those, 40s, 50s era people, the World War II generation that is quoted as being the greatest generation of mankind. Never complained, great for what they had, never complained about what they didn't have. And I think it's really cool and admirable that he, wants his father to be remembered as if his, what his father would want to be remembered as. And that question, when I asked him, do you think Major League Baseball does enough, or do you think they should do a, Larry Doby Day? I thought his answer was just fantastic. And I think it's, I guess it's a lesson too, because I think we get too caught up maybe in what we should be doing, and what does this person think? If we're being named after you, or if this is about you, what do you think? Who cares about what we think? You know what I mean? And I thought that was really, really powerful.
He had that one story too, when he wanted to meet Mickey Vernon. I believe it was Mickey Vernon. Yeah. And how good his dad, how good he was to his dad. And he was at a game in the early 80s, and he walked up to the wrong guy, and his dad pulled him and said, no, we're going. And it was a guy who didn't treat his dad very well. And his dad didn't, there was no confrontation. It was just, he just didn't want his son around that individual. And it wasn't until later that he realized, oh, that's what happened, and it's like, wow, it kind of gives you cold shivers in a not so good way.
Yeah. It's weird though, if you think about it, could that happen nowadays? Like, do you think in our society in sports, I mean, I don't think as a society, we would be that unfortunately easygoing about something like that,
where you can just kind of turn your head and just walk away and just say, you know what, I'm not even gonna
address it.
I'm not even gonna
acknowledge it.
I'm just gonna walk away, and it's, how do you, after you've been treated like that how do you do that? And he did it, and a lot of those young men back then did that. And it's admirable, because I don't know if I could do that. How many times did you want to turn around and get into somebody's face about something that's not even close to as intense as talking about, the racial issues in this country? And he did it. He did it for many years.
Yeah. And it really puts a lot of things in perspective too.
Mhm.
You know, no matter what you're going through, people
Yep.
have gone through way worse. And unfortunately, in this country, we still got a long ways to go
Oh,
when it
yeah.
comes to certain things like that with racial issues
Mhm.
and equal rights and everything. But,
Yep.
you know, I think, you know, Larry Doby Jr. shedding a phenomenal light on his dad that I did not know about. And I'm glad our listeners hopefully
Mhm.
were able to get that too, because a stand-up person, an admirable man that dealt with so much, you know, crap back in the day that,
Right.
you know, and turned it all into a positive in a way, and didn't share a lot and complain a lot to him. I
No,
was
no, he
expecting him to, you know, hear some stories. That wasn't
Right,
like
but-
how his father was like.
Right. I love how his son was talking about too. And toward the end of the interview, we were talking about his traveling around the world and being, you know, a roadie for Billy Joel for what, 25 years,
Mhm.
and hearing the stories there. And we only touched on just a few of those. You know, we'd love to have him back on, you know, hopefully, you know, maybe later on this summer or down the line where he can kind of expound on some of that stuff. But that's really cool. And you talk about a down to earth guy. You know, he's talking about wearing the jersey that his dad wore in the 48 World Series around the house like it was no big deal.
Yeah.
I mean,
How fantastic is
and then
that?
the Smithsonian calls and they want it. Yeah, well, okay, you can have it.
Yeah. You know, I was trying to find a picture, Scott, and I don't think I found it, of the concert when we were there at
I remember that. Yeah, the
at
Progressive
Field,
Field,
which was
right.
July of 2017. And we didn't really get into it too much of it, but for the listeners out there, if you're from Cleveland or if you were there at that concert, basically what happened was Billy Joel brought him on stage and said, "Oh yeah, you know, Cleveland's native son, you know, the son of Larry Doby Sr." And you know, he's wearing an white Indians jersey, and fans are going nuts. And you know, little did we know, Scott, almost 6 years later, we would get that man on our podcast.
Yeah, who would have thought that? Exactly.
And you know, I had a chance to meet him opening day when he threw out the first pitch or caught the first pitch from Tom Hanks. We didn't get into that either, but that was a really cool moment, and get a chance to sit and talk with him about his dad. And we talked more extensively here, obviously, but actually, you know what? I can't believe it, Scott. I found the picture on my phone.
You went through it that quick, and you found
I did. It's
well,
right.
it was
here.
like July of 2017.
You know what? I'll have to send. You know, I'll have to text it to him. But I don't know if you can really tell, but you can see it.
Yep, I can see it. Yeah, I know
Hanks.
you're holding it up here on the thing, but yeah, I can see that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a picture of him
Very
on the
cool.
Jumbotron there.
Remember, everybody, you can listen to our podcast, Sabol Brothers on the Baseline, Apple Podcasts. You can hear us on Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe too when you go on Apple or Spotify, or if you're at work and you have your PC up, you can go to Press Play Podcasts, and you can find Sabol Brothers on the Baseline, and you can hear our podcast. So I want to thank Larry Doby Jr. for joining us for just a superb interview. And we'll have more hopefully we can talk to him later on in the summer, John.
Yeah, that would be great if we can do that. We appreciate his time. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you haven't subscribed, go do that and give us a good rating on there too. That helps out with our distribution on all those platforms as well. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you again soon.